Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the narrow cobblestone alleys of 19th century Paris. Right around the time gas lamps flicker to life, carriages clatter over worn streets, and something soft brushes past your boot in the gloom. You look down, but it's already gone. A tail? A shadow? Probably nothing. Probably. Except it's not. It's a rat. One of thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Possibly millions. Because this is Paris during one of its least romantic chapters, where the aroma of fresh baguettes mixes with the stench of garbage, and rodents have turned the city into their private playground. The rats are everywhere. Beneath market stalls, inside bakeries, under church pews, and sometimes, if you're very unlucky, inside your shoe. You probably won't survive this. Not because the rats are vicious, they're actually quite polite in rodent terms, but because this was a time when simply living in a city meant bathing once a week, dodging flying chamber pots, and hoping the local vermin didn't steal your dinner or your breath, depending on which superstition you believed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Are you winding down or just sneaking in a nap before dinner? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking beside the Seine. The water laps lazily at the edges, and somewhere not far off, a street musician drags a tune from a battered accordion. You clutch your coat tighter, not from cold, but because the breeze carries a scent you don't want to identify, somewhere between stale stew and old socks. And it's everywhere. Paris in the 1800s is a city at war with itself. There's grandeur and elegance, yes. The sweeping avenues, the Gothic spires, the scent of warm bread curling through windows. But underneath that lace and linen fantasy lies the festering truth. The city is filthy. Not just, oops, I forgot to clean the sidewalk filthy. More like, everything is made of garbage and possibly haunted filthy, and rats love it. You turn a corner, and there's one now, nosing through the contents of a toppled trash bin. It's oddly relaxed, like a little fuzzy aristocrat out for a stroll. Its nose twitches. Its beady eyes meet yours for a split second. Then it returns to its meal, unimpressed. You've just been snubbed by a rat. Welcome to Paris. Historians still argue whether the rat population in Paris ever truly outnumbered humans during this period, but estimates suggest the ratio may have reached one rat for every person, or worse. That's a lot of tails underfoot. And while today's Paris is synonymous with candlelit dinners and luxury perfume, back then, the city often smelled more like soup bones and sewage. Open drains ran beside houses. Refuse from butcher shops, fishmongers, and vegetable stands piled up, sometimes for days. Add in chamber pots dumped straight into the street, and voila, the perfect rodent buffet. It wasn't just the working-class quartiers either. Even genteel neighborhoods had rat problems. Grand townhouses might have lace curtains and silver teapots, but beneath the floorboards, a symphony of scratching, scurrying, and the occasional fight to the death over a piece of ham. The rats were adaptable, smart, bold, and worst of all, they seemed to have no bedtime. You'd see them at dawn, poking through flower stalls, at noon, sneaking into pantries, and at midnight, oh, they owned the city then, a silent, fuzzy empire. You pass a bakery, the door is slightly ajar, and you catch the warm scent of croissants. Inside, the baker snoozes behind the counter, a flowery rag over his face. Behind him, a rat tiptoes across the windowsill, pauses beside a cooling tray, and gently nudges a flaky pastry toward the edge. Thief, acrobat, connoisseur. It wasn't always this bad. 100 years earlier, rats were pests, sure, but manageable. It was the boom of industrialization, urban crowding, and ballooning food markets that sent things scuttling sideways. More people meant more food waste. More food waste meant more rats. More rats meant more panic. It was a perfect storm of cheese, cobblestones, and chewed shoelaces. Of course, some Parisians tried to pretend the problem didn't exist. Ignore them, one merchant said, and they'll go away. Unfortunately, rats are famously unbothered by passive aggression. Others got creative. One boarding house placed bells on tiny strings near its pantry door. When the rats entered, the bell rang. Someone was supposed to rush over with a broom, but the rats quickly learned to eat around the strings. These were no ordinary rodents. These were the Parisian elite of vermin, charming, stylish, annoyingly intelligent. By 1850, rat-related complaints to city officials had surged. One report accused rats of consuming a full wheel of brie and attacking a baby's socks. Another claimed rats had chewed through a wall to attend a piano recital. That one may have been exaggerated, or not. You keep walking. The gas lamps flicker above you. Somewhere nearby, a cat yowls. Not a romantic rooftop cat. More like a tired, overworked one that's already failed 3 rat patrols tonight. You imagine the cat's thoughts. I trained for this? I used to hunt birds. Dignified creatures. Now it's all gnawed carrots and screaming bakers. But don't worry, help is on the way. Eventually, in the form of strange men with sacks, sticks, and suspicious stains on their coats. For now, though, Paris belongs to the rats. They slip through fences, dance on rooftops, and nibble their way through history. And you keep moving, stepping carefully over puddles, past shops shuttered for the night, through a city trying to forget what scurries beneath its silver moonlight. You cross a small iron footbridge just as the last of the market carts rattle home, and below you, the dark ribbon of the Seine murmurs past, slow and lazy, like it, too, is trying to ignore the gnawing sounds from under its bridges. But you're not headed home yet. Not when there's still so much more to see beneath the delicate crust of Parisian charm. Your boots strike the pavement near the Rue Malfatard, one of the city's oldest market streets, and here, the scent profile shifts again. You're now walking through a blend of wet cabbage, fish guts, and yesterday's bread, tossed lazily into gutters by tired vendors. The stalls have closed for the day, their canvas tops flapping softly in the breeze. But someone or something is definitely still shopping. Here comes one now, bold as a boulevardier. A big gray rat, hauling a chicken bone twice its size across the cobblestones like some furry gladiator returning from battle. You stand still. It stops. There's a beat of mutual respect. Then it vanishes under a creaking cart, tail high like a victory flag. You've officially entered the dinner hour for rats. Let's talk about how they got this cozy in the first place. Because, ironically, the person partly responsible for making Paris more livable for people also made it a paradise for rodents. Enter Baron Georges-Eugène Haussmann, the man behind the sweeping boulevards and grand symmetrical avenues. He took a chaotic, medieval tangle of a city and, with the backing of Napoleon III, raised whole neighborhoods, rerouted roads, and built Paris as we picture it today, elegant, airy, and utterly delicious if you're a rat. You see, Haussmann's renovations also meant new sewers. Big, efficient, modern sewers. And those sewers, oh, they were rat hotels. Heated, protected, and directly linked to every market and home in the city. If the old Paris was a confusing maze for rats, the new Paris was a luxury resort with central heating and room service. Historians still argue whether Haussmann anticipated this unintended side effect. Some say he saw it coming and simply shrugged. Others claim he thought modernity would chase the rats away. But what he did do, perhaps inadvertently, was create a 2-tiered city, the Paris of postcards above and a hidden rodent republic below. Above ground, the people of Paris dined late. Their dinners were long social affairs, and when they were over, leftovers piled high on the street corners. That's where the real feast began. You duck into a side alley now, candlelight flickering from a tiny cafe's window. Inside, a waiter sweeps crumbs off a white tablecloth, right through the open doorway. Down below, in the gutter, those same crumbs are intercepted midair by a scruffy rat with the reflexes of a magician. He scurries into a crack in the wall, never breaking stride. Even the trash system, if you could call it that, helped them. City sanitation was rudimentary at best. Waste collection was spotty. Bins were mostly decorative, and the idea of garbage day didn't quite exist. Instead, scraps were thrown out windows or dumped into the street for the occasional scavenger, or rat platoon. A common belief at the time held that rats were only a problem in the poorer districts. But in reality, the upper-class neighborhoods had just as many rats, if not more, because they had more food. Roast duck trimmings, stale tarts, spoiled pâté, all discarded with the lazy elegance of someone who would never dream of scrubbing their own floor. And the rats noticed. Oh, did they notice? There's an account from 1873, written by a priest who ran a modest soup kitchen in the Marais. He describes arriving early one winter morning to find a full dozen rats curled up in the corner, fast asleep, bellies round from what he guesses was a shipment of moldy lentils. He doesn't bother chasing them. He simply starts his fire and lets them sleep. They looked tired, he writes. Who was I to judge? Then there were the restaurants, the real ones with white linen and serious mustaches. Patrons often found chewed edges on menus. One chef reported that his kitchen cat simply gave up one night and began sleeping on the bread rack. She said the rats were winning, he lamented half-jokingly. But not everyone accepted this furry infiltration with such weary grace. Vendors at Les Halles, Paris's central market and belly of the city, started carrying rat sticks. These were not elegant devices. Picture a walking stick, maybe with a nail in one end, maybe not, and imagine swinging it at something darting under a cabbage. You reach Les Halles now in your mind's eye. It's early morning. The air smells of oysters and blood oranges. Fishmongers are yelling, carts are creaking, and under every stall, motion, a flick of fur, a tiny squeak. Sometimes the vendors throw scraps down just to distract them. Better they steal that than the good cheese. One grocer even began naming the regulars. That one's Pierre, he'd say, gesturing to a glossy brown rat sitting smugly on a beam above the onions. He only comes for the Gruyere. He has standards. There's something almost endearing about how the rats adapted. They were urbanites in their own right, clever, efficient, and utterly unbothered by humans. They knew our rhythms, knew when bread arrived, knew when we slept, knew when to hide, and when to march boldly across a ballroom floor mid-banquet like they owned the place. And in a way, they kind of did. So now, as you rest on a low stone wall and look out across the city, know this: Paris was once theirs as much as ours. They lived in the gutters and the gardens, beneath the tables and sometimes on top of them. And despite all our efforts, our traps, our poisons, our cats in little uniforms, they never really went away. They just got better at hiding. You wake before dawn, not from sunlight, it's still hours away, but from the low hum of movement. A broom swishes nearby, wooden wheels creak along cobblestones, and just barely audible beneath it all, the familiar skittering of little feet in a hurry. Welcome to another day in 19th century Paris. A time when rats and people practically shared the same schedule. You roll over in your straw-stuffed mattress, peek out a cracked shutter, and spot a scene playing out all across the city. Rat catchers rising with the milkmen, preparing for their rounds like some grimy, twitch-tailed version of the postal service. because now the humans are starting to fight back. The rat problem, while long tolerated with a shrug and a baguette, has officially become too large and too public to ignore. Complaints are pouring in from butchers, bakers, nuns, teachers, and at least one very upset opera singer who claims a rat bit his toe mid-aria. Something had to be done. Enter les chasseurs de rats, the rat hunters. They're not quite what you'd expect. These aren't soldiers or civil servants. These are freelancers, mostly enterprising men and a few women with burlap sacks, crude traps, and an unusual tolerance for squeaking. Some are clean-cut and methodical. Others look like they wrestled a sewer for breakfast. Many of them operate with the same air of practiced indifference as a chimney sweep or a man selling roasted chestnuts. Except instead of warm snacks, they carry cages of live rats, often strapped to their backs like cursed backpacks. You follow one now, tall, grim-faced, his boots patched and shiny with something you hope is just rainwater. His name might be Claude, or René, or possibly Monsieur Ratatouille, depending on local gossip. He doesn't speak much, but he moves with purpose, slipping into alleys and lifting sewer grates like he's opening drawers. In one pocket, a slingshot. In the other, dried sausage. You ask, why sausage? Because rats like sausage. And because sometimes a hunter needs bait. Not just for catching rats, but for keeping his little helper motivated. Ah yes, the helpers. Many of these rat catchers didn't work alone. They brought trained dogs, small, wiry terriers with nerves of steel and teeth like needles. Some were born ratters, others trained from pups. And a few, the truly elite, wore little vests. Not for fashion, for morale. The dogs seemed to work harder when they looked official. You crouch behind a market stall and watch a rat-catching demonstration unfold. It's early morning, and a crowd has gathered. A wooden pen is set up in the square, filled with straw and about a dozen unhappy rodents. The hunter, let's call him Jules, holds up his terrier, who responds with a wag and an expression of intense professional focus. Then he lets the dog loose. What follows is clinical, fast, efficient. The terrier zips through the pen like lightning, dispatching rats left and right in a blur of fur and straw. The crowd gasps. A baker claps. A child cheers. Someone offers the dog a piece of bread. And the rats? Well, the survivors are scooped up and dropped into a second sack. Not to be killed. Not yet. Because here's the strange twist. Dead rats weren't always the goal. Historians still argue whether the rat-catching industry was more about genuine extermination or theatrical control. Many hunters would sell the same rats multiple times, release them before a crowd, let the dog catch them again, pocket the applause and the payment. The same 10 rats might die a dozen heroic deaths in one day. You lean in, watching Jules wipe sweat from his brow. He accepts a coin from a housewife and nods gravely, as if he just saved her baby from a dragon. Meanwhile, his assistant discreetly empties a sack behind the curtains to restock the pen. Show business 19th century style. Others weren't so dramatic. In some neighborhoods, hunters placed traps lined with poison-laced bread or left cages overnight near bakery walls. But poison came with problems. Rats might die behind walls, causing weeks of horrific odor. Worse still, curious cats, dogs, or even children might find the bait instead. So some areas banned poison altogether. Then there were the bounty systems. For a time, city officials tried offering payment per rat tail turned in. Bring 5 tails, get a few sous. Bring 50, you could buy lunch. It worked, sort of, until clever entrepreneurs started breeding rats in barns just outside town, cutting off tails, and presenting them like fresh-caught loot. One city clerk grew suspicious when the same man brought in exactly 73 tails every Tuesday, smelling suspiciously like hay and optimism. Still, the bounty system caught on in rural areas. Farmers would host informal rat hunting days, complete with beer, songs, and the occasional bet. "I'll wager 2 francs my dog gets more than yours," someone would shout, as terriers disappeared into grain stores like tiny, determined missiles. And don't forget the amateurs. Children, especially boys, turned rat catching into a competitive sport. Armed with sticks, shoebox traps, and a questionable sense of hygiene, they roamed alleys like pint-sized vigilantes. Some were fearless. Others screamed at the first squeak and ran. But all of them dreamed of coins and glory. You paused to rest near a public fountain, its water green and gurgling. A notice nailed nearby reads, "Beware of unlicensed rat hunters. Fines apply." Even then, bureaucracy had a say in everything. And amid it all, the rats kept multiplying. Some adapted, grew smarter, learned to avoid certain scents or recognize the sound of a trap being set. One famous rat in Montmartre, nicknamed Le Vieux by locals, reportedly evaded capture for over 4 years and was said to have a white patch shaped like France on his back. He became a minor folk legend. Someone even wrote a song about him. It didn't chart. You walk on, past a bakery, now closed for cleaning, past a hospital, where rats were occasionally spotted slipping under operating tables, past a school, where teachers warned children not to leave crumbs in their desks unless they wanted to share history class with a squeaky guest. Because no matter how many tails were counted, traps were set, or dogs sent in, the rats were never truly gone. They were just waiting, watching, planning, probably from that shadow under your stool. You find yourself following the rats now. Not by choice, of course, but by trail. The droppings, the scratch marks, the gnawed corners of bread loaves and forgotten furniture. They lead you down into the true heart of 19th century Paris. The underbelly. It's dark down here, and wet, the kind of wet that clings to your ankles and doesn't let go. Your boots squelch with each step as you descend into the Paris sewers, an endless labyrinth of tunnels beneath the city, more vast and intricate than many cathedrals. The echo of dripping water surrounds you, occasionally interrupted by the high-pitched squeal of something that doesn't want company. This is where the real rat war unfolds, not in sunlight or city squares, but in the dank, winding arteries below. You hold your breath as a wave of air thick with mildew and decay brushes your face. Welcome to Paris's underworld, circa 1855. Population: unknown. Rat count: astronomical. Historians still argue whether Paris's sewer system, though revolutionary in design, may have helped the rat population grow in the first place. Designed under the direction of engineer Eugene Belgrand, these new tunnels were wider, deeper, and far more accommodating, not just to water and waste, but to all creatures fond of darkness and damp, including rats, especially rats. You inch forward, passing a trickle of something best left unidentified. Somewhere above, a baker is probably buttering croissants, blissfully unaware that 30 feet beneath him, a rat congress might be in session. Your lantern flickers, and then you hear it, the distant sound of splashing, tiny claws against brick, maybe even a soft sneeze. You freeze. Then, from the far corner, 2 glowing eyes blink at you, followed by more and more, until the wall seems to ripple. A whole colony, lounging on the curved sewer lip like they own the place, which, let's be honest, they kind of do. Parisian sewers were, for many rats, not just shelter, they were highways. From the food-rich markets near Les Halles to the slop-heavy backstreets of Montparnasse. These tunnels offered easy passage, warmth, and constant leftovers. A city above, a kingdom below. Of course, people eventually caught on. You stumble upon one of the city's earliest sewer patrol stations, little nooks carved into the tunnel walls, complete with hooks for lanterns and logs tracking sightings. Some sewer workers carried whistles in case they stumbled across an unusually aggressive swarm. Others brought dogs, mostly large, grim-looking ones who didn't flinch at sudden movement. One popular sewer legend, passed from worker to worker, tells of a massive albino rat, white as bone, eyes pink as roses, longer than a wine bottle, that supposedly led its own pack near St. Denis. They called it Le Pape, the Pope. No one knows why. Maybe because it always escaped. Maybe because it seemed to command silence. You skirt past an old drainage pipe, its metal bars long rusted through. Inside, the remnants of a rat trap sit in pieces. Springs broken, bait gone, and a tiny gnawed message left in defiance. Or maybe it's just chew marks. Either way, it feels personal. The irony, of course, is that the new sewers were meant to fix everything. Before them, much of Paris's waste had flowed through open channels, stench rivers snaking through neighborhoods, carrying disease and misfortune. The improved system was hailed as a triumph of modern sanitation. But as often happens with human progress, nature simply adapted. The rats, ever resourceful, claimed this new world as their own. One city inspector in 1862 wrote, somewhat dramatically, "We have laid down silk roads for the vermin. They travel freer than the clergy." Another proposed installing fine mesh grates to block the rats' passage. A third suggested cats, hundreds of them, released into the sewers en masse. That plan was not approved. And yet, amidst the squalor, the rats thrived. You spot a nesting area near a pipe bend, carefully assembled scraps of fabric, twine, paper, and even a discarded playing card. There's a certain artistry to it if you squint, which honestly you probably should avoid doing down here. Another debate among scholars: how much did rats actually contribute to disease outbreaks during this period? While they're often blamed as the main culprits of plague, modern research complicates the picture. Some argue fleas were more to blame, while others point to poor hygiene and overcrowding. Still, it's hard to ignore the image of rats crawling across hospital floors or into homes, trailing who knows what behind them. You take a wrong turn and nearly walk into an old wooden ladder, slick with moss. Climbing it leads you up to a storm grate, above the blurry outlines of a busy street. You pause there, staring through the slats, watching carriages roll by. A lady drops a bit of bread. A rat darts out, grabs it, and vanishes into the same system you're now standing in. It's almost poetic, but your moment of reflection is interrupted by a sharp squeak behind you. You turn slowly. The Pope? No, just a regular rat. Fluffy, maybe even a little chubby. It stares at you, unmoving. Then it blinks and turns away. You let out the breath you didn't know you were holding. Some sewer rats grew bold, enough to stare down a human. Others lived like ghosts never seen. But all of them benefited from one key truth: out of sight, out of mind. Paris above the ground could feign cleanliness. As long as the rats stayed down here, nobody had to think too hard. Except for you. You're definitely thinking. You duck back into the main tunnel, nearly tripping over a length of rope left by a previous patrol. A sign above reads, "Tenez bon, elles sont plus nombreux." Hold fast. They are more numerous. Reassuring. By the time you climb back into the street, blinking against the sunlight, you're carrying with you a new respect for the ingenuity of rats, the strange choices of 19th century urban planning, and the fact that you managed not to scream. Congratulations. Just maybe check your boots. You wouldn't want to track any friends home. Back above ground, you breathe in the comparatively fresh air of the Parisian morning. Though fresh is generous. It still smells faintly of horses, coal smoke, and something vaguely fishy. But after the sewers, it's practically perfume. You head toward a small building tucked behind a meat market. No sign, no fanfare, just a plain door and the faint sound of clinking metal from within. This, you realize, is one of Paris's stranger war rooms, the workshop of a professional rat catcher. Yes, that's a real job. Welcome to the age of the official chasseurs de rats. You step inside. The scent hits you first. Part sawdust, part rodent, and part wet dog. An older man stands over a wooden table, sharpening what looks like a tiny pitchfork. He doesn't look up. "Watch your step," he mutters in a gravelly voice. "There's one under the cabinet I'm saving for Tuesday." Paris in the 19th century was full of odd professions. Rag pickers, chimney sweeps, leech collectors, but few were more simultaneously admired and avoided than rat catchers. They were both saviors and symbols of squalor. Some Parisians would thank them with tips and bread. Others wouldn't even meet their eyes on the street. This particular fellow introduces himself as Armand. Or maybe Am. You're not sure, he's missing a few teeth. But he proudly explains his methods as he gestures to his collection of tools. Wire snares, collapsible cages, burlap sacks, and a peculiar device that looks like a butter churn with spikes. You nod politely and try not to imagine how that one works. One of the lesser-known facts about these catchers. Many trained their own animals. Cats, of course, but also dogs and even ferrets. Armand slash-'em whistles, and a scrappy little terrier bounds into view, tail wagging. "This one's name is Napoleon," he grins. "Short, loud, and always invading places he shouldn't." Classic. The rat catcher trade wasn't just physical, it required strategy. You had to know where the nests were, which streets had the softest garbage, which butchers were careless, and, most importantly, where the rats would run when startled. Some rat catchers memorized entire neighborhoods, mapping them not by buildings but by waste levels and rodent behavior. Historians still debate whether certain districts paid off rat catchers to leave nests undisturbed, so that rats wouldn't migrate into their neighborhoods. A kind of back-alley détente. It wouldn't be shocking. This was a city of politics, after all, even among pests. Armand slash-'em recounts a proud moment. The time he pulled 72 rats from a wine cellar in the Marais, all without spilling a single drop. He grins. That was a good night. You glance at a large wooden box in the corner, from which faint rustling sounds emerge. He opens it with a flourish, revealing a dozen live rats packed in sawdust and straw. "These are the show rats," he says proudly. "They'll be going to the spectacle tomorrow." You blink. Ah yes, rat baiting. Not content with just extermination, Paris turned pest control into entertainment. Public rat-killing shows became wildly popular by the 1850s. People would gather to watch terriers and hounds compete to see who could dispatch the most rodents in the shortest time. Bets were placed. Wine was drunk. It was essentially gladiator games if the gladiators had tails. While these events were technically frowned upon, they persisted for years, especially in the poorer arrondissements where boredom was deadlier than disease. "Better to watch dogs kill rats than watch rats kill babies," someone once quipped. Dark, but effective PR. You ask Armand slash-'em if he ever participated in the shows himself. He chuckles. "Once, but my dog stopped to eat a sausage someone dropped, and we lost the match." Tragic, but it wasn't all blood sport. Some rat catchers tried to rehabilitate their profession. They wrote pamphlets. One, titled "On the Moral Duty of the Catcher," argued that rodent control was a civic virtue akin to firefighting. Others gave school demonstrations, hoping to teach children about the dangers of rat bites and food contamination. There was even a short-lived movement to dress rat catchers in uniforms, complete with little hats and official badges. It didn't catch on, probably for the best. You step outside again, still digesting all this. The sun is higher now, and the streets have begun to stir. Vendors roll carts down cobbled lanes. A woman pours a bucket of soap water into the gutter. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing an accordion. And in the alley beside you, two rats wrestle over a discarded baguette end. One wins, scampers off. The other watches you with a look of quiet judgment. Despite the valiant efforts of men like Armand/Am, the rats were not vanishing. If anything, they were adapting. Smarter, faster, hungrier. The city's response was always a few steps behind, like chasing shadows through fog. One odd historical footnote. In 1873, a letter published in a Parisian newspaper proposed the idea of urban rat diplomacy, suggesting that rather than fighting the rats, the city should simply designate an area, preferably in the outskirts, as a free rat zone, provide food scraps, encourage them to stay put, let them govern themselves. It was satire, of course, probably, but in a way, it reflected a quiet truth. Paris didn't want to defeat the rats. It just wanted them to behave, and sometimes they did, until they didn't.